Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I missed a video last week because I've just got a little bit busy. And then when I was going to film, the weather was horrible. It was really windy, and I really want to do an outside video today. And you can see today it's a beautiful day. It's not too much wind, blue skies, and it is quite warm though. So I've got my hat on, I've got some sunscreen on. We're going to go out into the garden and do a review for the spring summer season. So it's a good idea at the end of a season to go out into your garden and sort of take note of what went well and what didn't go well. And, we may sort of think, oh, I'll remember that, I'll keep it up in my head. But if you're anything like me, I don't. So I like to write down a little bit of a review and just sort of jot down some notes about, what went well, what didn't go well, what do I want to do differently next time, so that when it comes around to next time, I can read that and remind myself that some things just need to be done differently. Now, of course, some things are out of your control. So the wind's now picking up. I've just got to push through and just keep doing this. Some things are out of your control. So there's environmental things. There's the weather and pests and things like that you may not necessarily have any control over. But there are things that you can learn that you might change or do differently next time around. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through, tell you what worked, what didn't work. I'll have to say that it hasn't been the best year for produce. It just, for a number of factors. Some are human factors, some are environmental factors, but it certainly hasn't been a good year this year. But I think it's important to share that as well and to talk about, what things do go wrong and what things don't work, and what I might be thinking about doing for next time. All right, so let's go out into the garden and have a little bit of a recap and see what has gone well for me. And I'll explain the things that have gone. Some have gone horribly wrong, actually. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is this behind me. Now I have got some shade cloth over this because it's fairly warm, but they're my cucumbers. So this is just a regular variety of cucumber. I don't know what it's called exactly. I just had some seeds given to me. They're kind of like, not a Lebanese, but a regular cucumber you might get from the supermarket. They went really, really well, although I'll show you in a moment, they're starting to get to the end of their life. And they're drying off a bit and not really doing quite as well, not producing much now. But they really did produce a lot. I was hoping for a lot of cucumbers this year because I had those plus another variety, but that didn't quite work out. And we had plenty to eat, and we did pickle some. You'll see I had a video a little while back pickling some cucumbers, but I really wanted to do more pickling. But that didn't really eventuate. And I'll show you why. It's because I had another variety, and I'm going to flip you around so I can show you that. I had another variety that did not survive very well at all. So this is the cucumbers that did do well in this garden bed here. So in this first round bed. And then over here in this second bed was where I had another variety, which is called sweet striped cucumber. And this is one here, which it's not doing very well. This is the one that's actually survived the most, but has still produced nothing. And this bed's sort of being overgrown by weeds and I've sort of given up on it. I'm going to pull it all out and get ready for the next season. But I do have some lovely zinnias that the bees are loving. I don't know if you can see those bees. So I've been watering the zinnias and looking after those so that my bees have something to come and hang out on. But I've given up on the cucumbers. So in here I had the sweet and striped cucumbers. And I had 3 plants in there, I think, and 2 of them died. This one survived, but is still not done very well and has produced nothing. Obviously, it's looking a bit horrible now, but I've sort of stopped looking after it. And you can see here that I've got sunflowers, which are all dried out now. I've collected some seed, and these will be pulled out. But I'm wondering if the sunflowers had an effect on my cucumbers, because these cucumbers, the sweet and striped, I grew over there last year and they did really, really well. So what I do is start to think about, okay, what's going on here? Why didn't these work? Is that bed better for some reason? I'm not quite sure what the difference would be, but is that bed somehow better? Or has something else affected the cucumbers in this bed? I'm thinking about the sunflowers. I did a little bit of research. A few people have been saying that sunflowers are allelopathic and they produce like some chemicals in the soil that can affect the growth of other plants. However, I've got, zinnias right beside them and they're all growing perfectly fine. It was just the cucumbers. My thought is potentially they were competing for water. It's been a really dry year, so I wonder if that had a factor, that whether that played a part. So my thoughts are, next year I'm not going to grow sunflowers with my cucumbers and then see what happens. So I'm not quite sure why it happened, but I had a good crop and a horrible crop. Now, if we move into the greenhouse, I don't know that I want to be in here for too long. I might just stand here because it's quite warm in there. It's very hot, and I don't think I want to stand in there for too long. But the greenhouse, the tomatoes, you can see they're growing right up to the roof in some points. You can see up there. The tomatoes grew really well, and one thing that worked great this year is I actually had ripe tomatoes, at the very start of December, which is kind of what I was hoping. I was hoping to be able to get tomatoes in December, and that's what I was hoping the greenhouse would do for me. Last year that didn't happen. It just wasn't warm enough in November and December, and I didn't get any ripe tomatoes early. But this year I did, because we've had a lot of warmth. So that was definitely a big plus. Getting tomatoes that I could pick at the beginning of December was, that was great. The downside is that I would say once summer really got going, the tomatoes slowed down. They slowed down their production. They slowed down their ripening. And even now, I'm sort of having a look. I can see some that are red and ready to pick, but I would say there are a lot more ripe tomatoes out in my garden than there are in the greenhouse. So a couple of things I'm thinking. Is it the soil? Do I need to fix the soil in the greenhouse? And that's a possibility. I know that my capsicums, although they grew well, the bell-shaped ones got blossom end rot at the bottom, and that could be a soil issue. It could be a calcium deficiency in the soil. It could also be due to infrequent sort of watering, but I have been watering them regularly, so I don't think that's the issue. I did put some lime on. Maybe it's too late, I'm thinking. But the other capsicums, the longer varieties, have been great. It's just those bell ones have got blossom end rot in all of them. So I need to think about improving the soil and I'll make notes that I need to add lime to the soil next year before I plant. So maybe it's a soil factor. The other issue is the heat. It's been a really hot summer. It's been consistently warm from the very start, from December onwards. We've had a few cool changes, but I would say much more consistently warm than normal. We do get hot summers, that's normal, but it tends to kind of fluctuate a little bit. But I'd say we've had more consistency in our warmth, and it gets really hot in here. I don't know what the temperature is, but I've got doors and windows open, and it's still very hot. So I'm thinking I need to put shade cloth over for next summer, and maybe reducing the heat in the greenhouse might make a difference. I don't know. I'm just going to jot these ideas down. We're going to try them and see what works. So one would be soil. I'd probably need to look at the soil. And two, maybe reducing the heat for summer. I think last year it went a lot better, but we didn't have as much heat. We did sort of once we got into January and February, but I would say it hasn't been anywhere near as hot as it's been this year. So I need to kind of think about what am I going to do in the greenhouse. It's great for starting things early, but once summer hits, they just don't seem to be doing as well as the ones outside. So some positives and some negatives there. I'm going to stay in the shade while I talk about my tomatoes out in the garden. Couple of things there. They're doing well now. I'm picking tomatoes every day. I'll show you some of the varieties that I've got that are ripening and we're picking each day. I certainly didn't get as many tomatoes as I had hoped. I don't think I'll be doing any preserving, maybe a little bit preserving of some cherry tomatoes, but I don't think I'm going to have enough to preserve this year, which is a bit of a bummer. But the reason is, one, I'm not sure if you've been watching one of my earlier videos. I had planted out my tomatoes at the start of November, which is when we can normally put it outside. There's still the risk of frost, but that's generally when we plant them outside. We did get a frost. Unfortunately, at that time when that frost came, we had some stuff going on. We had a sick dog that we had to rush to the vets, and there was all this other stuff going on that I did not check the temperature to see what the forecast was. Woke up the next morning and realised there was a frost. I lost a number of tomatoes. Thankfully, many of them survived, but I did lose a number of them. And I think the ones that I've lost are the San Marzano varieties, because I haven't got any out there. I think maybe there might be one, and it's not really doing much. They're usually my most prolific tomatoes. Even in a bad season, I always get really good tomatoes from them. And they're the ones I like to preserve with. And I think they're the ones I lost to frost because I don't have any out there. So that's a real shame. And that was like a human factor, because there's always that risk when we plant that we could get a late frost, but I just wasn't watching the weather and I didn't know there was going to be one. I would normally cover them over and protect them if I knew a frost was coming. So that was a human factor, or a life factor, let's just say. So unfortunately, the tomatoes, I didn't get as many as I would have liked. Secondly, in terms of the tomatoes, we had bushfires. And again, if you saw one of my previous videos, that was in December, towards the end of December, around Christmas time. And that obviously meant that my focus was elsewhere. So we had at least a week, maybe even a bit more than a week, of high levels of anxiety and stress and preparing for a bushfire. And of course, the bushfire did come onto our property 2 times. And then there was all the recovery afterwards. And then we were just exhausted. It's really, really exhausting. So my garden really did get neglected during that time. I didn't prune my tomatoes as I should. I didn't weed. I did get some mulch on, thank God, before all that happened. And so the garden, the tomato, they look a bit of a mess. They're kind of growing wildly. I'll show you in a moment. But I'm still getting tomatoes, so I'm not going to stress about it. But it certainly doesn't look pretty. So I might turn you around. I'm going to show you what my tomatoes look like. And yeah, the gardens are looking a little horrible, but you know, things happen. So you can see here I have got a lot of weeds, although the mulch has helped to ward off some of the weeds. So I've got some good cherry tomatoes there, and I think they're called Christmas grapes, but I can't quite remember now whether that was that variety or not. I've got another variety. You can see I haven't even tied that up. That's hanging down on the ground. But I've got another variety here of tomatoes. They're a larger variety, really nice for slicing. These here as well are growing really well. I think these might be tomato, potentially. I'm really bad at remembering what's what, unless they're really noticeable. I'll come back to that zucchini in a moment, because that's another thing that hasn't gone so well. And then here I've got this is a black cherry. So I'll just show you. You can see that they have like a darker, these aren't quite ripe, but that's a black cherry tomato. And over here is another one. Some of them are a little small, but that's also a black cherry. And this one here is a black Russian, and I've had some beautiful tomatoes that I've been picking. These are obviously not ripe yet, but I've got some inside that I picked, and the black Russians are delicious. So I will definitely grow those again. I need to make a note. So really I've only got these ones here, these cherry tomatoes, the black Russian, and then up the back here. Oh, and this one here, sorry. This is a tomato, I'm quite sure. That's producing heaps, even though I have not looked after it very well. It's falling over, it's sprawling, but I'm still picking tomatoes. That has been a good one, and it's very, very nice as well. And then I have this wild one over here, which is a cherry tomato. That's just growing. I think this might be, I had a few pink bumblebees and I think they died as well. Let's have a look at what, no, these I think are a Christmas grapes, I think, cherry tomato. But you can see that has not been pruned. It is just sprawling everywhere. And this is the ones I think are San Marzano. Actually, let's have a look. Yeah, they look more like the size or the shape. Oh, that's just come off. That looks more like the shape of a San Marzano. That's not right, but I will bring that inside. And that's all that survived. So they're the only tomatoes I have. So it's really minimal apart from the ones I've got in the greenhouse. So a little bit disappointing, but I am still enjoying some really nice tomatoes to eat each day. The other thing that didn't go well is zucchini. And zucchini are honestly the easiest thing to grow. They're usually so prolific that I generally only have 2 plants at the most, and it's so hard to keep up with them. I have not picked a zucchini at all this year, not one. First, the reason was I had some issue germinating the seeds. I don't know why, but several times I tried raising the seeds in pots in seed raising mix and they didn't germinate. I finally got one to germinate, and I don't think the seed was old, but I don't know what was going on there. And so I finally got one, got it out into the garden, and it's only just starting to do something now. I'll show you in a moment, but I think maybe the first zucchini is growing, but we're in March. It's way too late. I don't think I'm going to get, it's looking very healthy, but I don't think I'm going to be getting much. It's just been way too late in the season for it. So this is my zucchini plant. So again, it looks okay. And I think in here, that there is the start of a zucchini. So I've got one growing. I don't know, I might get a few, but it's just been so slow and I got them in so late. And then there was a delay in getting it in the garden because of the fires. Anyway, I might get a few, but zucchinis have not been prolific this year at all. The other thing that didn't grow well are my beans. I grew some bush beans and some climbing beans. There are some I've just seen over the other side near the Black Russian tomato that seem to be doing okay. But I've got some over here behind me down here that have not done well at all. And the reason is actually we had all of these grasshoppers and we had so many. They're kind of gone now. I don't see them at all anymore, but it must have been a good year for them because they were everywhere and they were eating all of my bean plants, like the leaves. They were just destroying them. So now I'm actually seeing the beans are starting to look okay. And I think it's because a lot of those grasshoppers are now gone. I don't know where they've gone. Maybe it got too hot for them. I'm not sure. But they're gone now. But they really stressed my plants out while they were young and they just weren't healthy. And in fact, the beans here, down here where my dog is, I've stopped watering them. We were running low on water, so I decided not to try and save them because they weren't doing very good. But I do have some further over here that I think are doing okay, except that my trellis is not high enough and I really needed, let's have a look. Yeah, there's a few on here. They're starting to look a little better, but I think they're yeah, I don't know that it's worth trying to. I get to a point where I think, is this worth trying to continue to help? Or are we getting to the end of the season and there's no real need to bother? So I don't think I will. The other thing that has been really challenging this year, I'm going to go stand back in the shade because it's hot. The other thing that's been really challenging is it's so dry. It has been extremely dry. Not just, we're used to having dry weather in summer, but it's the previous season, so even winter and spring, it was dry. We have not had much rain at all. The ground is dry. Our dam is really low. Our water tanks were getting really low. I was actually starting to get concerned that we were going to run out of water and we were going to have to buy some in. Thankfully, this morning, we've had a delivery of water and that was because our dam was used for firefighting. So we had helicopters and firefighting units take water out of our dam. We can apply to have that water replaced. So they come and they estimate how much water was taken and then they arrange for the water to be replaced. We got our first tank of water this morning and it's drinking water. So it comes from the reservoir where the town water is. And we asked, is it possible for you to put it into our tanks first? And once we've got enough in our tanks, then put the rest of the water that we're owed into the dam. And he just said, I don't care, I'll put it wherever you want. So our first tank came today. I think we have 5 tanks owing to us. So our first tank came today. They filled our tank off the shed, which was getting down below a quarter. I was starting to get worried because that's what we used to water the garden with. So we filled that. So now it's full and I feel much better. Don't have to stress so much about when we're going to get some rain. And the rest of the tank went into, the rest of the tanker went into our house tank. And now we're up to about half or just over half in our house tank. And that's pretty good because that's a very big tank. And now the following trucks that come, which won't be today, it'll probably be next week and the week after, we've got 4 more trucks due, and we'll just put all of those into the dam, and that will help to fill our dam up. So that was very lucky because we were starting to stress about the lack of water and thinking we were going to have to buy some water in. But thankfully he came today and he's filled our tanks and we can go back to watering. So I was really, giving up on plants that weren't doing very well because I didn't want to waste water on them, and the beans were one of them. So that's pretty much it. I've got, some herbs, and I had lettuce and other things like that growing, but they've, the lettuce have gone to seed and there's not much growing in the other beds at the moment. I'll be getting them ready for the next season. The one thing I think that I really want to do better for next year is a bit more resilience in my garden, because this summer's just been really challenging to grow in. It's hot. We've had no rain. We've had fires. There hasn't been good rain for, I would say now, nearly close to 12 months. And I don't know. I'm not sure when we're getting rain. I don't know what the future holds. So I need to think about my garden being a bit more resilient to these sort of this weather. We've been pretty lucky over the several years that I've been gardening here at this property. That I haven't had to worry too much about that. We've had enough rain and et cetera, but this year has really kind of made me think that I need to look at how I'm doing things and put some more resilience into my garden. So although I can't control the weather, I can do what I can to make my garden more resilient. And I think the number one thing that I'm going to be focusing on between now and next spring-summer season is improving my soil. If you have good soil, of course, you still need to water, but if you have really good quality soil, it will hold more moisture. Our soil's really sandy. It's pretty crappy. I've really got to do a lot of work to improve it, and I've noticed our raised beds do a lot better. And I think that's because they're off the ground and we've put soil, manure, compost and so on in them. But my bed's down on the ground, which eventually I am going to raise up. I'm going to raise them up a little bit. They need some help. The plants are still growing, but I don't think they're thriving. I think this dry weather, even though I'm watering, is just not doing enough for them. And I think they really struggled. So my plan is to work on improving the soil going into over the next year, going into the next spring summer season. So I'll do some videos about the sorts of things that I'm doing and how I'm going to do that. But that's definitely one thing that I've noticed I've got to put more effort. I think we get all excited about what do we want to plant and what seeds are we going to buy and what seeds are we going to sow. And really, in the end, that's great and that's all fun. But if your soil isn't any good, you're not going to get you're not going to get the outcomes that you may want and the abundance that you may want. So that's something that I'm really going to work on, is the soil. So over coming videos, you will see some of the things that I will be doing to help improve the soil. I'm going to get out of this heat because it is very hot. So just a little bit of a wrap up. Bad season this year, not the best, due to a number of factors, human factors, weather factors, bushfires, and really dry weather. So going forward, I'm going to make some changes, and I'm going to be writing myself some notes for next time as to what I'm going to do differently. So let me know, how did your garden go this summer? Did you have successes, or was it more of a failure like mine has? And what are you going to do differently next season? So I think it's really good way to kind of learn and think about what has worked, what hasn't, what am I going to do differently? And that is how you grow as a gardener and as a homesteader. So thank you. I will see you all next time. And I'm going to go inside and get out of this heat.